Good afternoon, Rahla Xenopoulos in New York, in Westchester, New York, no less. That sounds very Lani, I must say. Where is Westchester, New York, actually?
Sort of like the suburbs. So it's just, I'm about 30 minutes north of the Upper West Side. And it's very beautiful. It's very kind of big gardens and swimming pools, and it's not what you expect from New York, but it is in New York.
But you don't live in an apartment block, you live in a house.
You live it's suburbia. It's very much it's kind of the suburbs of New York. So yeah, it's kind of like Constantia or those kind of areas.
Okay. I'll pretend I know Constantia. I really don't know Cape Town well, but I know it about as well as I know New York. So, I'll just take your word for it and just move on quickly. Rahla, you're a nice Jewish girl married to a nice Greek boy. Sorry about George.
What did I say?
What was that? Who was that?
Huh? What did he say?
What did he say?
Still not. That's ridiculous. I thought that they like sort of made up at one point.
No. Right, there we go. Carrying on. Well, that was fun. Okay, let's just roll back and go. What did I ask you? I can't remember. Okay, nice Jewish girl, married to a nice Greek boy. Then I said, sorry to hear about George Bezos. And then we moved along swiftly. Did your husband know him? I mean, the Greek community is very...
So just back to my husband is his mom's Jewish and his dad was Cypriot.
Yeah.
So that's the Greek connection. And his dad actually worked with George Bezos.
Oh, is it?
In sort of the 60s and 70s, I think. Yeah, but I didn't know him.
My brother was married. Hang on, let me try and get this right. My brother was married to George Bezos' son's ex-wife.
Okay.
Before she married the Bezos. So yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So it's a little confusing. She's a little nuts, but
yeah.
So is my brother. So it's it's fine. It's okay to be like that, we suppose. Yeah. So yeah, and friends of mine were really close. Very, very Greek friends of mine are very, very close with the Bezos family, and that they're kind of broken today. It's very sad to see. But anyway, I mean, he was 92 and he had a pretty good innings, I think.
Incredible life.
Yeah, huge statement. But we're not here to talk about George Bezos. We're here to talk about Rahla Xenopoulos. Lovely name that I had to spell 3 times and then get autocorrected after I've spelled it correctly. But anyway, Rahla, what are you doing in New York?
I'm teaching. I'm teaching creative writing, yeah. And I've switched, those lessons have all gone on Zoom, which is quite nice because it means we did a workshop on Saturday and there was someone in Spain and Cape Town and Johannesburg and Los Angeles and New York and London. And so it becomes, when it's on Zoom, you don't realize it can be very international, much more so than it is sitting around a table. So I teach and I've took a long break from writing, but it seems like I'm starting again. I've started a new book and I'm a mother. I'm very much a busy mother.
They're teenagers, right?
They're 15. I've got 3 15-year-olds. They'll be 16 in February.
So how did they acclimatize to the whole new world? Bit of a change for them.
I think that teenagers love New York. New York is fantastic for a teenager. And they kind of landed with their feet running. They were like up and at 'em. I remember the morning we arrived, they got off the flight and they were like, we want to go to the coffee. We went out for pizzas immediately. So they're kind of they've traveled a lot and they do love New York. They're very happy here.
It's funny, I was in New York in 92. I didn't like New York. I'm not Johannesburg's big, but I'm not a big city girl. So you don't find me in the city. I prefer smaller, more interesting community type places. That's why I did very well in Mafeking of all places.
Yeah, no, I completely, and I'll tell you something, the first time I came to New York, I fucking hated it. I was horrified. Jason, my husband, lived here. He went to college here. And then he brought me here a vacation.
Okay. Okay, let's go back to where you were. He was at college. Sorry.
Yeah. So my husband was at college here in New York, and he brought me. He's always wanted to come back, and he's always loved it. And he brought me for a holiday. And I've got to be honest, it was winter. The snow was schmutzig. I didn't like it one little bit. And then he left me here. In fact, he went back to work, and I had a couple of days in the city, and I went it was before I was diagnosed and medicated for bipolar disorder. I went like crazy New York nightclubbing and up all night for days and days. And I'll never forget, I was coming out of a nightclub where I had been the entire night, and my husband's secretary phoned and said, "I'm just phoning to check that you have checked in." And I was like, "Checked in where?" She said, "Your flight is leaving in just now." I said, "My flight's only leaving tomorrow." So I was so determined to leave. I got a you used to hire these limos that would literally drove me over the bridge to the airport. I arrived at the airport with not a handbag. I had one of those moon bags with my passport inside it and about $4. And I ran up to check in, and the woman at check-in, the air hostess, said to me, "You can't get on this flight. The flight is closed, and it's an international flight. You can't get on here." And I literally jumped over the counter, and I grabbed her by the lapels, and I said to her, "I know it is. I need to get out of your country." And they pulled in, she got such a fright. They pulled in the security, and they drove me like up over the tarmac into the airplane. They knew it was prior to 9/11, but they obviously looked at me and they thought, "We don't need this crazy bitch."
And they let you come back in the country, no less.
I think they've forgotten by then. They've had a lot of crazy bitches since then.
I wonder how long their memory is. I was asked to leave in America as well, very rudely. I was leaving anyway, and they said, "You've got 10 days to get out of the country." I was like, "It's not very nice of you." But they're quite anal. They are very anal, but maybe our country could learn a little bit from them.
They never get it right. No countries get it right.
No, because they're always in the wrong. Doesn't matter what they do.
Yeah.
When you were in South Africa, when were you diagnosed with bipolar?
Many years ago. Oh, it's about 24, 25 years ago. And I was diagnosed by a very fine psychiatrist in Johannesburg.
And how did you cope? Were you medicated? Were you boarded? What happened?
It was many years of different processes, and by the time I was diagnosed, I'd been misdiagnosed with many other illnesses. So the diagnosis event, I was in a state of absolute shock and fury. And then when I got over that, I kind of started working with the psychiatrist and went on medication. And so it's been a process. It's a lifelong process. I think living with any illness.
Yeah. Have you read Samantha Smirn's book? It's a very hard book to read.
Okay, I have not read. You know what? My first book was a memoir about living with bipolar disorder, and I've sort of felt like in that process of writing that book and of all the interviews and the that went along with it, I felt like I kind of I almost felt sort of saturated. It's a terrible thing to say, but I felt saturated with mental illness. Yeah.
That was a memoir of love and madness.
Yes. Yeah.
And had you already met Jason at that point? Obviously, because you were manic in New York.
Yes, I started writing very late. I started writing at 36, 37. Yeah. Quite late in life.
You're only 40 now, girl.
51. I'll be 52 end of November.
50 is a good age, hey? You kind of like become your own. Yeah, I don't mind being 50. It's cool. In my 50s, shall I say, as opposed to 50.
You know, I always used to say if I'd known how good my 40s were going to be, I would have turned 40 10 years earlier. But I really do feel that when you've had chaos in your life, aging is quite a nice, just steadying thing. The older you get, the more kind of lucid and in control you feel, and the less you don't care so much about stupid things, which is a relief.
Yeah, I started at 35, like not caring about stuff, and I think by the time I turned 35, I was no longer scared of my mother. I think that was the beginning of my emancipation. You know, it's like, okay, I'm an adult now. I'm not scared of you anymore. And I was shit scared of my mother for years because she was a demon.
I'm still scared of my mother. In fact, the last book I wrote, a lot of people say to me, you need to go to the Jewish library in Cape Town. You've got to go there. They've got all the books you need for research. And I don't like libraries. I don't like borrowing books. I don't like lending books. But eventually I thought, like, I really need all the books they have. And I went and I got a huge stack of books. And then, being the terrible citizen that I am, I didn't take the books back. And also, no, well, given that I was doing research, I underlined important facts. I documented pages. Anyway, they kept phoning and phoning. And of course, I was too scared. They kept saying, like, what's with the books? And I just avoided. Now, this is the difference between a regular library and a Jewish library. The Jewish library, when they were pissed off with me, they phoned my mother. They phoned my mother and they said, Rahla has not brought back her books. And I swear to God, I was like, within 2 minutes, it was like I was dealing with a poltergeist. I just got in the car and I threw those books at them and I said, here's my donation, buy more books. But they knew their customers. Still scared of my mom.
Hello, Mel's husband. I like the way he was peering over your shoulder, Mel. Your second book was Bubbles, about Bubble Schroeder. Did you have to do a lot of, why Bubbles of all people?
I'll tell you, I went on a blind date in my very early 20s, and I looked at this guy. I arrived at the restaurant, it was Cranks in Johannesburg, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm not going to make it through starters, let alone a main course with this creep. And as we sat down, he said to me, my father is a murderer. And I was like,
charming.
Oh my God, I'm staying here for the rest of my life. Tell me about your father. Anyway, he told me about the Bubble story. And I was so appalled. I went home and I woke my parents up and I said to them, what? And both my parents said, everyone knew. We all knew that she was murdered and it was covered up. And I kind of felt like, so someone had to tell her story. It was way before the Me Too movement. But she was so vilified for being murdered, you know. So I really wanted to go into the nobility of her character that hadn't been in any way researched or told.
Is there anybody in the room that doesn't know of the Bubble Schroeder murder? Just as a matter of interest. Denise, you don't know about Bubble Schroeder?
Nor do I, Mandy, sorry.
Tell us about Bubble Schroeder, the succinct version.
So Bubble Schroeder she came from a very poor family, a poor family in Vereeniging, South Africa. And she went to the big city to make her fortune. And she was sort of a Marilyn Monroe beauty. And she was a good time girl, and she got hooked up with 3 immensely wealthy, nice Jewish boys. And she got murdered. And the 3 boys, their parents hired Izzy Maisels, who would go on, it was his first case, and he went on to defend Mandela. But when he was defending those boys, in order to win the case, they had to condemn her. So that was the famous and notorious thing is that she choked giving one of them a blowjob. And that's what always gets
Which
people.
nice Jewish boy has a penis big enough for that? I mean, really?
Good point.
They were. Now, I met one of the women who married one of those boys. In fact, she bought a piece of Mandi Friedman art. It was quite. They live in Melrose,
Yeah.
Birdhaven, around there. And she collects art. And she was the next door neighbor of where I had my exhibition. And she bought my chair. I was quite. In fact, my mother says to her, maybe your grandson. And I said, I'm kicking my mother. I'm like, no, it wouldn't be her grandson. It would be her bloody husband, Mom. So she married in. I mean, would you marry into a family where there's such a dodgy reputation? All right, there was a lot of money. Maybe you can overlook the reputation for all the money. I don't know. But it was, anyway, needless to say, my art is in her home and maybe one day I'll be famous. So yes, I can't remember the surname, but anyway, it's fine. But if you're interested, Google Bubble Schroeder and then buy Rahla's book Bubbles, because it's a very nicely written book and it's written like a novel, so it's very easy to read. Okay, so after Bubbles, a bit of a gap. You started teaching writing, doing writing retreats, things like that, having children, having triplets.
So what happened was that I wrote the memoir, and then I had triplets, and then I wrote Bubbles quite soon after. And then I wrote a book called Tribe. And after Tribe, I started teaching. And then after Tribe came the last book.
Season of Glass.
Yeah.
I haven't read that. What's it about?
It is about it's about a soul whose destiny is to be the Messiah. But as it turns out, it's quite complicated to become the Messiah. So she has to keep being born and dying and being born again as her spirit evolves. And it's the very many ages that she goes through in order to achieve that Messiah status. So she goes through ancient 10th century Ethiopia. She starts with King Solomon, and then ancient Ethiopia, and then mid-century India, and then the Spanish Inquisition, and then Johannesburg during 1976, and then the Holocaust.
Who was she in Johannesburg in 1976?
She's quite fun in Johannesburg 1976. She's sort of a young wife who's driving. Her husband is a doctor, and she's driving to get her husband where he's working in Soweto on the day, and she dies in the car accident. So there was that, and then it ends up in the future. It ends up back in Ethiopia in the future. It was a lot of that book was a lot of research. That was a book where I borrowed books from the Jewish library, because it was so much research. There was so much studying and learning on that one.
So what are you working on now, Rahla?
Now I'm working on a book. It's about it's also complicated. It's about a horseback librarian who was friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, because the horseback librarians program was started during the Depression by Roosevelt, and he had this very strident feminist wife. So it's semi-fiction, sort of historical fiction, and it's it's a gang of girls in the 1930s who deliver books to poor people.
And they get the books back. I mean, do these poor people actually return the books? I mean, are they better than Rahla Xenopoulos?
No, they're not. Yeah, it's quite amazing. Roosevelt realized during the Depression that in order to create employment for people, he had to educate them, and they had to be literate. So part of the New Deal was that he hired this gang of women who rode up creeks and cliffs, like that, stone cliffs, through the winter and the summer, and they delivered books to the homes of these penniless families and helped them to learn to read, and they'd go every 2 weeks to collect the books. If the Jewish Library had come to my home and collected the books, I would have given them the books. It was just the, you know, getting in the car and driving down the road.
I mean, it wasn't that far. It was just down the road and everything like that. Why did you become a writer? What was it? Have you always wanted to write? Did you always want to write?
No, writing always felt like a very lofty, grown-up thing to do, and I thought that you had to be very smart, and I thought you had to know how to spell. I didn't think that a dyslexic person could write. And then literally a friend of mine was going to a workshop, and she said, please come with me. And I said, I can't, it's not in me. And she said, just come as my buddy. Come, just be my workshop buddy. And I was very blessed that the first workshop I ever went to was with Anne Schuster, who was a great teacher. And I sat at a table with fantastic writers who kind of nurtured and coerced and encouraged me. And then I had this, I felt there was a calling to write the book, to write a book of living with bipolar disorder, because at that stage there was nothing. So I really felt like if anyone was going to do it, I was in a privileged position where I could. It's easier for me to write a book if I feel like there is a moral calling to do it that propels me. So that was kind of how I became a writer.
So I'm getting little private messages here asking me about your writing process. Do you get up every morning and write? Are you like Jeffrey Archer, who gets up every day and writes 5,000 words before he starts the day? Or do you just grab 5 minutes when the kids are at school?
I want to say, you know, I love that like Virginia Woolf thing that you have a room of your own. And I do always want to have a scented candle, and I always have a pot of tea like this.
Well, that's a nice pot.
This pot I got from Moira Fisher. She's a Cape Town writer.
Fabulous. Beautiful pot.
Not only a genius person, she's also very kind and generous. But the truth is that I get into a phase where if I'm writing, I will literally stop at the red light and I'll get an idea and I'll go, oh my God, and write it down. So I don't have the luxury of solid time to write. I write when I can and what I can. I write always first draft, I write by hand, and then I type it up on a computer. And then I send it to my beloved publisher.
Do you have like a little notebook? What do you use?
Hundreds of notebooks. And you know, when I started, I always had these magnificent moleskins and all these fancy, beautiful things. And then I realized, like, I don't earn writing an entire book wouldn't pay for those moleskins. So now I just write on like a shitty paper, like whatever I've got.
Anything that's just grab it and write. You know, like one of these. This is where I do my bookkeeping.
Yeah, exactly. That's quite smart for me. That would be quite posh for me because that's got a hard cover. So mine are cheaper than what you've got there.
Oh, Rahla. But those things are meant to last, you know, posterity, like your original notes and everything. They need to go forward into the vaults of life.
Who's got space?
I don't know. So what do you do with them afterwards?
I do throw them away.
Oh my God, you're a heathen.
I have kept, no, I actually haven't. I wanted to say I've kept, I send my work into a publisher and then he prints it out and corrects it. So for a long time I kept his corrections, but I think now I've started using them as recipes, the other side.
Oh, so at least you're recycling, huh?
Yeah, that was it. That was it.
Okay, so Anna's given me like a whole list of questions here, so I don't have to think today. So I'm just going to base this. Annie, do you want to carry on with this interview because you're doing really well here? Do you wait for inspiration or do you approach it as a daily job?
I think that you do have to feel inspired to do to write an entire book. Just tell me that someone's vacuum cleaning. Is it making a noise?
No, not really.
Okay. So I think that in order, writing an entire book is a hard, relentless, thankless task. And in order to do it, you really have to feel inspired and motivated to get to the very end. That being said, I do believe there's like, if your eyes are open and your heart is open, there are so many characters and so many stories all around us. And I often in workshops, I often tell people, I have a friend whose wife is a very renowned writer. And I was making breakfast one morning. He was staying at us and I said to my daughter, Tallulah, do you want me to make French toast out of the challah? And he stopped me and he said, please, can I have that? And I was like, French toast? And he said, no, that line, please, can I give it to my wife? Because that will be a line for her. She will use it in a story. And I really got that because I'll often, you often there's situations. I'll never forget, I was at my children's school once and there was a concert and there was a child who had Down syndrome who stood up, and I think she played the flute, and she came off the stage and her father was sitting sort of in row A and she sat behind him, and through the back of the chair he grabbed her little hand and they held hands like this, and they didn't say anything to one another. There was just this holding of hands, and I thought, I will steal that moment from you. I will steal it and I will put it in a book.
So is it in a book? Where do we find it? Or hasn't it happened yet?
Well, it might not, but I all of those things. The other thing that once happened to me, I was at a restaurant and I saw a husband and wife having a huge fight. And I was like, looking, and eventually I got so fascinated, I went up to their table and I went like, and really engaged. And the two of them looked up at me and they were like, excuse me. I said, no, don't mind me. I just want to work out if he was right or you were right about the banking. So I do have, I think so. Anne, in a long roundabout way, I hope I'm answering your question. I think that it's a matter of I think that inspiration is necessary, but it is a matter of being conscious and alert. That kind of being thin-skinned and open of heart, if that answers your question.
Particularly when you're eavesdropping on somebody else's conversation at their table.
Well, you got it.
How did that end? They stopped
actually don't
arguing.
remember. It ended with my children being like the shemzach, so ashamed. They've lived in horror of me and my eavesdropping. But what I've noticed is that my daughter now, she'll be sitting somewhere and she doesn't even have any discretion. She just looks and she goes, for an hour. I'm sorry, Scott.
Scott, come here.
I'm going to bring, he's got a shush, sorry. No. Come. No, don't move.
Scott,
sorry.
dog.
He's a terrible person. He's a terrible person. My son has gone off to school, so he's very malcontent. He wants his daddy.
Oh, and he traveled well, Scott, though. He did travel well.
Much better than any of us. No jet lag, no. He's very happy in New York.
And hi, Scott. How's it? Yes, I'm over here.
I was talking to someone last night and I said the problem with Scott is that he's not a dog. He's more of a cat. He's got that cat personality. You know, when they are like, I love you, I love you, I love you, you're my favorite person in the world. And the next day they, excuse me, who are you? I've never met you before in my life. He does that. He's very fickle. He does that thing.
Yeah. Stop it. Behave, Scott. Yes, thank you. Okay, so now where are we? We're still on Anna's question. She said, thank you very much. That does answer her question. She's a serious eavesdropper and won a writing competition doing exactly that. Anna, you're going to have to elaborate on that because we want to know more. Okay.
Anna, come to a writing workshop.
What would you like to be remembered for, Rahla?
I always say that I want a narrow waist and a broad mind, and if I can't keep a narrow waist, at least let me have a broad mind. So I'd like to. I don't know if any of us are remembered, but I'd like to, or I don't know if I'll be remembered, but I would like to keep my mind broad and open. And the other thing I always say to the kids is that we came into this world to see not what we can take, but what we can leave behind. So please God, I will leave behind more than I take.
Well, you've definitely left behind 3 children so far. I mean, they're very much present. You wrote a beautiful essay to your children. Was it on their bar mitzvahs or when they turned 13 or what was it?
I wrote a bar mitzvah speech.
Yeah.
But it literally went viral, and I swear to God, I don't think my kids read it. I recited it to them on the day of their bar mitzvah, and they kind of half-heartedly listened. Thanks, Sarah. But I don't think I repost it every year and I remind them of it. But I don't know, maybe in 20 years' time, they'll tell their children.
Yeah, when they've got kids. Yeah, because that was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. It's like, you're very much like Joanne Hitchens. When you post a status update, they're not like 3 lines like the rest of us. They're essays, you know, and they're fabulous to read, and they're witty and lighthearted, and you know, people of the book. And I always think, is she talking about readers, or is she talking about people of Facebook? What is that?
That's the Facebook people, because I've found that Facebook people are so very generous. So whenever I'm researching something, I could say people were incredible. I would say, like, does anybody know the breakfast rituals of royal families in Ethiopia in the 10th century? And literally people would come up with stuff. So I always said that my daughter Tallulah was my research bitch. But people on Facebook were very generous and gave me a lot.
Never mind Google, okay? You've got Fugle.
Exactly.
Okay, so
that's people.
So what else does Anna want to know? Do you get writer's block? And if so, how do you deal with it?
I get writer's indolence, Anna. I am the laziest person you will ever encounter in your entire life. So I don't think it's block per se, but there is that thing, I don't know if Anna has this. Last week, I literally baked cupcakes that were, they had the middle, I took the middle out of the cupcake, then I made a marshmallow and cream and sugar filling and filled that inside the cupcake, and then I toasted marshmallows on top, and then
I love that.
Gold leaf and strawberries on the top. The point of the story is that I don't even eat cupcakes, but I was so determined that I did not have time that day to write. I knew that I had to hand in a short story, and I knew that people were waiting for it, but I also knew I would find anything in the world to do to prevent me from writing. You know, they always say writers have the writers have the cleanest houses, because again, we want to avoid writing.
Procrastination is fabulous.
Fantastic. So Anna, is it Anna or Anne?
Anna.
So Anna, the truth is that when I've been really, really stuck, and just generally, the one thing that I know always gets me out of a writer's block is if I go to a writing workshop. That's the one thing. And the other thing is having a person. I've got a very, very smart publisher who knows how to get shit out of my brain.
Who's your publisher?
Fareed Boiter from Penguin.
Okay. I had a little flapper on Facebook yesterday because I asked I asked the publishing house for an interview with one of their celebrity authors, a local who's published a couple of bestsellers, quite a well-known person who I've met and had at my shop before, like you. And then I think there were 50 or 60 people at the shop, so it was a really good audience. And they said, I'm sorry, but said writer is just too busy to do an interview. So I'm like, she's only doing big interviews. So I said, what do you mean big? And you're like 200 plus. Those days are over. All right, you can do it on Zoom, but it's not like the same where you take over Hyde Park Mall and there's chairs for Africa, you know. A Zoom interview, you don't know if there's 5 people or 25 people. You're clueless unless you actually have a look.
I get that. I do. I get that. I mean, I don't know if she had a book that had just come out, but I know that when you've just had a book come out, it is quite hectic when there's a lot of interviews. So you've kind of, I would do yours first, but it might not.
You would.
It might not have been her decision.
I'm assuming they actually didn't even take it to her. I would lay money on it that they've made the executive decision that she's not doing interviews. I'm prepared to guarantee there would have been 60 or 70 people online to hear about it. I don't think that's a small thing. So I was quite a little bit offended, and I wasn't very polite to the publisher. So I got a funny feeling I won't be hearing from them again. I'll be nice to somebody else going forward. Oh boy. Right, another Anna question. Does she wake up in the middle of the night with ideas, notebook by the bed?
I do. I'm a solid sleeper. I do go when I'm very, very much in a project, then I do find that then it's like everything I see or dream or things that my children do, everything will somehow relate to what I'm writing at that time. And then I have a process when I'm really stuck for answers. I have a method of kind of getting answers in your dreams. So of asking certain questions and putting certain intentions before falling asleep. And when I do that, I keep a notebook and a pen next to my bed.
Don't you just use your cell phone? I mean, they especially have these little record features. No.
So I was taught, and I really believe it's true, I was taught that when you write through your hand, when you write by hand, you write through your heart. And when you type, you write through your head. So for me, first draft is always heart-based, and I have to go by hand. And then when I'm typing it up, I want to go through my brain. It becomes a more cerebral engagement, and then I go through my brain.
So what would happen if you recorded it verbally? Where does that feature in the left brain, right brain, heart brain thing?
I do, and this is very personal. I have a sister in New Zealand who's a phenomenal writer. And I know she used to laugh at me about the pen and paper thing, but funnily, I think she might have changed her tune. I think she might also be writing on pen. I think she might have adapted. But it's not a rule at all. In workshops, I only like people, I prefer people to write with pen and paper, because I think you plow far deeper and you investigate further when you do by pen. But I've just never tried to record or to type it up first. I'm afraid I don't know, I'm superstitious like that.
If I wrote by hand, I promise you it would be a mystery for the rest of your life, because you wouldn't be able to read it. I have that handwriting.
I do. I get that. I really do get that. And it's very funny in workshops, like with millennials, I have to constantly be doing exercises with them, because people are not accustomed. Literally, people's hands go into cramp because they're not accustomed to writing. And my first rule is that I just always say, forget the handwriting, forget the spelling, forget the punctuation, forget the grammar. All of those things are irrelevant. So your handwriting, but somehow people do find their way through when they're reading it out or typing it up.
No, my handwriting is so atrocious. I should have been born a doctor. I mean, I don't have the marks, never had the marks for a doctor, but I really, with handwriting like that, I wrote a shopping list once and went shopping, or not once, more than once. For the life of me, there was an item on that shopping list. To this day, I don't know what it was. I looked at the item before, I looked at the item afterwards, like, this has got to be, I couldn't work it out. So we didn't buy it. And clearly we didn't need it because nobody asked for it when I got home.
Exactly.
So just do without it. What do you read?
What do I read? I am a very voracious reader. And I think that is like I don't believe in being a writer unless you are a committed reader. I really do. And I believe that if you read trash, you will write trash. It's like that simple. So I was terribly, as I said, I was terribly dyslexic as a child. And and I was the youngest of 5, and my mom she was a speech and drama teacher. So she would read Great Expectations, aiming it for the older siblings, and I would be like sitting on the floor. So as a child, I was given Shakespeare and Dickens, Greek mythology, which I think it was incredible. It really shaped who I am as a reader and how I perceive the world. And I did the same with my children. I always said they might be small, but they're not stupid. So I read, that has stuck with me. I read the classics. Every time I start a new book, I have a rule that I read The Great Gatsby, just to remind myself that it is possible to write something that magnificent and awe-inspiring. I just finished The Weight of Ink, which I adored. And now I'm reading a sci-fi book that I actually woke up this morning and thought I probably shouldn't be reading this.
What are you reading?
So ashamed I've forgotten the name. I think that my brain is it's fantastic writing, but it's just not the week or month or year to be reading dark futuristic fiction. So I'm going to go back.
It wouldn't be the Lauren Bucas book, would it?
No, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, a book about a plague in a plague. I mean, really? Her writing, I loved Shining Girls, but I didn't like Monsters. What's it called? Broken Monsters. I found that book quite disturbing. I didn't enjoy it at all. And Afterland, I felt it was okay, but Shining Girls stands out. It's shiny, I must say. And she's great to talk to with her blue hair. I love that. Tell us about the tattoos.
The first ones I got when I finished my memoir, and each one has a different symbolism. And then I have to take my watch off. And then they're really
It's
small.
a big watch.
It is. That one and that one I got when I wrote Tribe. And this one I got when I wrote Bubbles. And these last 2, it's sort of, I do one for each book.
What about the kids? Aren't they immortalized?
Well, so it happens that this one is because for beauty. So there are 5 petals for each member of my family. And that one is for abundance. So there are 5 rays of sun for each member. And finally, this one, I don't know if you can see it. There.
Yeah.
That was my daughter's best friend who died a couple of years ago. So Tallulah and I both she's got this tattoo that says Rose, and I've got it, and her friend's mother has it. So the kids are kind of in there.
Are you influenced by music at all?
I am greatly, and I'm very serious about music and about, again, what music you listen to when you're writing. I love listening to scores. I love listening to film scores. I love Ennio Morricone. But funnily, I was doing a playlist for the workshop, the September workshop that I've been doing, and I did a playlist so that as people are going through the workshopping and writing and being in the period of a workshop, they have specific music. And I said to the kids, I need something happy to end on. And my daughter was delighted. She went through all of the ABBA, and she came out with this fantastic ABBA song. And I was very excited. And I found myself in the kitchen, like dancing away to ABBA. And my first son, who's very edgy and quite goth and quite emo and very strict about these things, walked into the kitchen and he saw me dancing to ABBA and he said, now you're just enjoying this shit. He's like, this does not work. You're just enjoying yourself.
Okay, which ABBA song was it?
Take a Chance on Me. Take a Chance on Me, because I wanted all the writers to take a chance on themselves. I wanted everyone in the workshop to take a chance on themselves.
It's so funny that you do that. I love that you do that, because now whenever those people hear that song, they'll associate it with you. And I remember when I did a Contiki tour in 92. everywhere we went, the tour guide would play music appropriate to where we were going. So, like, just for example, on the way, first of all, she would start the day every day with Taking Care of Business. Taking Care of Business, that song, So every morning, got on the bus, the same song would play. And then, like, on the way to Graceland, she was playing I'm Going to Graceland and Walking in Memphis. The songs, the music was all, it was amazing. And then, like, Bourbon Street, and she really, and so those songs evoke the memories of the places. So I think that's a fabulous thing that you're doing, that you have music that goes with the writing. What other songs did you have?
I can't remember the exact playlist offhand. I've got Once Upon a Time in the West, the score for that. I'll have to ask the authors. I have to say, I do hope that every time they listen to those songs, they don't think about me, but they think about their writing process and what they were writing during that phase.
If something, God forbid, happened to you today, can you hear me? We're still here.
Have I lost you?
No, we're still here.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, we're still here. Hallelujah. If God forbid something happened to you tomorrow, which of your books would you like to think was the one that stands out?
I think they all, it's a little bit like saying which child would stand out. But I think the first and the last. So the memoir and The Season of Glass. The Season of Glass was the most ambitious for a writer, and it is the most ambitious for a reader.
Okay, what was that noise?
And the memoir was that me or you?
No, it wasn't. Sorted. Uitgesorteerd.
Okay. Okay.
How have you handled lockdown?
I've really loved lockdown. I have tremendous guilt about it, but I have loved it. In New York, the first 3 months were absolutely, it was so strict. And I loved it because I had my children at home and I have my husband at home and the dog is happy and we're all kind of, no one shouts at you when you stay in your pajamas for 3 months. I literally went from pajamas to a bathing costume. That's for 6 months. That's been, I think that if you're privileged enough that you live in a comfortable home, and if you're privileged enough that you live with people you like, then it can be a very nice thing. So yeah, for me personally, it's been lovely.
Was it good for you creativity? For your creativity, was it good? Because a lot of people came unstuck during lockdown with creativity.
I think that it was such full-on parenting and housekeeping, and I literally I really feel like a 1950s housewife. But there was, towards the end, I did start writing again. And I had different creative outlets during lockdown. I didn't write as much as I should have.
Okay, well, you should have produced about 3 or 4 books, during lockdown. It's not like you didn't have 3 months to write. What's it like now?
You know what? It's easy for me if someone else expects it of me. So what I did write during lockdown was that I wrote a short story for Melinda Ferguson. She
for that, yeah.
Lockdown. And I was very lucky because I wrote the story for her, and shortly thereafter someone else commissioned me to write a short story. And then my publisher said to me, why don't you send just 1 paragraph a day? And the second short story I wrote kind of led to the next novel. So it had a domino effect.
What do you mean by 1 paragraph a day?
Well, because I was not getting anything done. So eventually he said, okay, you can do that. You can manage 1 paragraph a day, which was helpful, which was pathetic, but helpful.
Anna says the leaves falling got to me. What do you mean by the leaves falling got to me? And the leaf blower was broken, but no one told me. Leaf blowers are something out of Satan's handbook, Anna. I saw somebody with one today. I'm like, can't you just sweep the pavement? Tell us about the leaves falling, because I want to know more about that.
Me?
No, Anna.
Oh.
Are you wondering if Anna exists? Because you actually can't see her. And I've just finished this book. I loved it. Have you ever read a book by a girl called Gilly Macmillan, an English writer? And it's called To Tell You the Truth.
I have not read it.
I absolutely loved it. It's a mystery. It's a suspense. It's not a great work of literary fiction. I mean, it's certainly not. But I read it from cover to cover, I think in sort of like 5 or 6 hours. And she's a novelist in the book, and her husband handles the finances and everything. And she has an imaginary friend who she's had since she was a little girl. And this imaginary friend is the detective in her books who she's, and she goes to, as a grown woman, she still has her imaginary friend who's the detective in the book. So I really enjoyed it. I like.
There's a thing, I know I never had real friends. I literally I was such a weird, bullied, bizarre child that I actually did not have friends. But it turned out okay because I had a fantastic imaginary friend. My imaginary friend was like a million times cooler than all of the kids at school. But then my sister read that actually people who have imaginary friends as children often grow up to become writers. There's a strong link between the imaginary friends and writing fiction, which kind of made some sense.
So did your imaginary friend play with your sister's imaginary friend? I mean, were they friends?
No, my sister didn't have an imaginary friend.
Oh, that's so sad.
Really good writer. She didn't need one. Everyone loved her.
Where did you grow up?
We grew up in Johannesburg.
And go to school?
I always say I've stayed at the finest mental institutions in South Africa, and I've been expelled from all of the finest schools. So I went to King David, to Rosebank Primary, to Parktown Convent, and to Woodmead. Woodmead was a great school. Yeah.
Is that where you matriculated from?
I didn't matriculate.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, I can't talk to you anymore,
No, I got
no education.
Then it was called a Standard 8. Now it's a grade 10, and I barely scraped it together. I got that. That was the end.
My dad left school in Standard 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it never held him back. I think that I think he left school after the accounts teacher said to him, "What does DR stand for?" And he said doctor, and that was the end of school instead of debit. So that was it, done. So yeah, I think a good education or like a technical education, if you're that way inclined, then they should actually bring back apprenticeships and things like that.
Definitely. I have I loathe school. I think school is very nice. It's just not designed for children. It's a dysfunctional, draconian system. So anything they can do that's different to what they're doing at the moment.
Did you homeschool your kids?
My kids did. They went to Hertzler in Cape Town, which was wonderful. And then they went to an amazing school in Cape Town called Cedar House. And then there was a few months that we were just traveling around Europe. And at that time, they didn't really homeschool, but they did learn. We were together all the time in different places. And then they go to summer school, to Oxford University, do a summer school. So they have gone to that, and they did that. And in fact, my daughter Tallulah did the Oxford Summer School online this year. The boys didn't want to do it because they were like, if we're going to do the work, we want to be in Oxford. But Tallulah did it all. She woke up every morning and Zoomed, and she loved it. She actually learned a lot.
And I think traveling for them, I mean, there's nothing more mind broadening than actually traveling anyway. You know, if you want to open your mind and you want to experience different things and be exposed to art and culture, there's nothing better than travel.
Yeah,
I arm trade travel these days because I can't afford to go anywhere.
I didn't grow up traveling. I didn't travel until I met my husband. In fact, I never stayed in a hotel until I met my husband. But I love that my kids have it. I really do.
Yeah, that's incredible. I have to ask you, what's it like raising triplets? Not that you know anything different, as opposed to like raising one child or two children, but triplets must have been a handful when they were babies.
I was very lucky that I was in South Africa when they were babies, because we had incredible help that I would not have had in America. But it's whenever I'm asked that in interviews, I always think, never mind what it's like for me to raise them. What's it been like for them to have me as a mother? But it's a great adventure. And there are things like now during lockdown, it was so much easier that they both had all three of them had their buddy. So, and it's easier in terms of like practical things like traveling. It's much easier because they don't need friends. They've got one another. So for us, it's been a lovely journey.
Do they like each other?
They adore one another. They are as different as they are close. They're completely different, but that's a big thing, because it's a difference. I don't know if anyone's multiples are very different to regular human beings. And their power comes from being so it's not easy to discipline, because if you try to discipline one, the others climb into you. But it's lovely to be around.
Okay, Rahla, I have one last question from me personally, and then I'm going to let you go and do whatever it is you're going to spend your afternoon in your pajamas doing. Where do you get your skin from?
My skin?
Yeah, look at it. It's flawless. Look, I have wrinkles. I'm only a year older than you.
I've got it all over. I've got it on my feet. I've got it everywhere I look. It's their skin. It's amazing.
I know it's the biggest organ in the body, but it's flawless. So where does it come from? Your mom, your grandmother? Is it your father's side?
Thank you. I think my mom always had incredible skin. My mom always had very good skin. Yeah, that's it.
I mean, isn't that skin amazing, guys? It's just absolutely flawless. It's gorgeous.
I eat healthy. I eat very healthy.
No, you're vegan, aren't you?
Pretty much. Not completely, but more vegan than, yeah, pretty much.
And the kids are meat eaters. You were cooking earlier.
The kids are meat eaters. I've started them doing they're doing 4 days a week vegetarian and 3 meat, because I just can't stand it. But on Sunday, my husband did a braai, and they all loved that. They were very happy to have a braai in New York.
Did you braai like the regular kind of stuff, or did you do what they do in the movies, like burgers and hot dogs?
We do sometimes do that. They do burgers on the braai. Yeah, they call it a grill. My husband does those like gourmet burgers, but I think that they do. It's quite icky for me because I don't eat meat, so they do ribs and steak. Yeah, they do those things.
You know, I'm actually with you because I'm vegetarian. I'm not vegan, but I still cook meat for my clients and stuff. And it's getting harder and harder for me to actually cook the food, or to go and buy the food. And I feel guilty. Like we were sitting my mom and I go out on a Monday for food. When in between shopping for clients, we go out and we have lunch. And we go to this one little sushi place. And on the TV, they were playing. There was a tuna market, and it was all in Japan. And there were these people they specialize in tuna, and they send these pieces of tuna all over the world to the different restaurants. And there's me. I mean, tunas are huge. And there's me looking and thinking, shit, how long has that fish lived in the sea for? And you just fished it out and cut it up and sent it off. And I'm finding it getting worse and worse. And, you know, like the more I stay vegetarian, the less I want to actually deal with people who eat meat. Not deal with people who eat meat, but cook food for people that eat meat. And I know that I could never be a vegetarian caterer. So rock in a hard place. I shall just build my Zoom empire up.
I get that. I do. I understand that.
Rahla, it's been a pleasure talking to you this evening. It's wonderful to see you face to face again. It's been too long. And when that new book comes out, what's the ETA? A year or so?
I guess, yeah. Maybe a year or two.
Well, when that new book comes back out, you'll be here, same time, same place, and we will do a session about the new book. And you won't forget your humble puddings and say, I'm sorry, I only do launches for 20 people or something ridiculous. Promise.
Of course, absolutely.
Thank you, Rahla. Everybody else, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Have a wonderful day, Rahla. And meet me back here on Saturday afternoon for a bit of line dancing. So wear those dancing shoes. Bye, everyone. Be good.
Bye. Thank you.